So we're really excited to welcome Mr. Ned Colletti. He's a former Dodgers GM, a current analyst for SportsNet LA, and a current scout for the San Jose Sharks. Mr. Colletti, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, pleasure to be with you too.
So when you came into my class at SC, the one thing I was really wowed by was your story. And I think it's something our viewers would really appreciate as well, being baseball fans. And I'm sure some want a career in sports as well. So I already know the answer, but how did you get your start in the world of the MLB front office?
Well, it was a bit of a circuitous route. It was also 40 years ago now. I was a journalism major in school and went to a junior college. I didn't have the grades or the financial wherewithal to be admitted into a four-year school. I'm from Chicago, and so no school in the state of Illinois that was a four-year institution would give me the time of day, and they were right. I didn't know how to learn yet. I was still a long way from trying to figure everything out. So I got a degree in journalism from Northern Illinois University, and I started my career as a sports writer. And then 41 years ago or so, I went to Philadelphia and started covering the National Hockey League and the Philadelphia Flyers. And soon thereafter, I arrived in Philly. My dad got sick, and my dad ended up with lung cancer at the age of 49 and sadly died at the age of 51. So to go really quickly through it, my family, we decided to start a family when my dad got sick in September of 1980, new to Philly, and start a family. And we fast forward a year later. In September of 1981, I buy a duplex in Philly. We share a wall with a neighbor because my wife was 8 months pregnant at the time. She stopped working. She was a legal secretary. I was a sports writer for a Philadelphia newspaper and covering the Flyers. And our income was probably cut almost in half, not quite in half, by her deciding and me deciding that she would be best at home as a full-time mom, and bought this place at 18% interest, which today it's about 2 or 3% to buy a home. And in October our son was born, and in December the newspaper folded. So I went from having two incomes to having no income. I went from being not a parent to suddenly having a newborn. Went from being somebody who rented to somebody who had a mortgage that was astronomical for that period of time because of the interest rate. And most of all, I had my dad who was sick and dying back in Chicago. My mom and my dad were the love of each other's life. They grew up together, and it was heartbreaking to go through the entire experience. And my mom had never driven a car. We weren't financially prosperous. My dad was a factory worker, and we just, they struggled to make ends meet. They lived in a garage the first 10 years of their marriage. I'm the oldest of two boys. I came along 5 years into their marriage, so my first 5-6 years I spent living in a garage in Chicago. Not the typical route to the MLB front office, I wouldn't think. But I was fortunate in that somebody who I met in Philly called me and said, "Hey, we have two jobs open here with the Cubs. One was in media relations and the other was in publications." And I said, what will these pay, And he says, $13,000 a year. And I did the math, and I was going to struggle to be able to have a mortgage in Philly, move my family to Chicago, and do what I needed to do at that rate of pay. But he reminded me that there were about 50 people in line for both positions, and I was fortunate to be able to interview for one or the other. And so I asked him if I could speak to the boss, the general manager, Dallas Green. And he said, "Sure, but don't ask him about money because we've got so many people that are interested in this. We're going to be able to pay whatever we feel like paying." So I arranged it. I told him I need to speak to Dallas for a minute. And I teach at Pepperdine as well as the scouting and the TV responsibilities that I have. And I always tell students, and I may have mentioned it in your class at USC, that you have to be different. You have to figure out a way to be different. If everybody in the lobby of the prospective company that people are trying to go to work for all have gone to great schools and have great GPAs and have done all these other things, how are they different? who's going to get hired out of that situation if it's not, a friend of the family type of thing. So I really didn't have anything to make me different. And for whatever reason, perhaps divine, I got Dallas on the phone and I said, "Hey, thank you for the minute." And he says, "Yeah, we've got a lot of people that are interested in these jobs. So, keep it brief and understand that, I don't want to talk about finances here. You haven't even been hired yet." I said, "Well, I'd like you to consider something. I'd like you to consider paying me $1,000 to move back home from Philly to Chicago, and paying me $15,000. And I started to continue my thought, and he interrupted me. And he said, "I thought I told you don't talk about money." I said, "Well, I just need a minute of your time. I'm not finished yet." And he said, "All right, wrap it up." I mean, he was not happy. And I said, if you would consider that, I would love to be able to apply for both jobs, because I know I can do both jobs for you. And you'll save salary, you'll save the benefits that go on with a full-time employee, the raises, you'll be giving one person a raise going forward. And I need it. I need the extra couple thousand and the chance to move back home. My dad is sick. My mom doesn't drive a car, and she's taking a bus and a train and a couple buses to the hospital to see my dad. And I said, "Come in tomorrow." So I went the next day and interviewed and was blessed to have the opportunity to get both jobs. And I never had a chance to ask Dallas this question. He's deceased now, but he continued to give me more and more opportunity. And I kind of tie it together with, if you play golf and you try to play golf with one club, it's going to be a little tough to play with one club. What I brought to the Chicago Cubs was one club. And little by little, he gave me more and more responsibility. And so I ended up with two clubs, three, in symbolism here, two clubs, three clubs, four clubs. So that after 13 years with the Cubs, I went to the Giants, and I had done just about everything in a baseball front office, and which helped me get the Giants job, which helped me get the Dodgers job. So all those things kind of worked out. But had I not come up with that idea to do two jobs, I would have been kind of like everybody else, except I wasn't a former player. I wasn't living in Chicago, even though I knew the Cubs inside and out. It was my team growing up, kind of like you guys with the Dodgers and the Giants. So that's how it all began, and that was 40 years ago.
Yeah, and you mentioned your climb kind of culminated in landing the Dodgers general manager job in 2005. And I'm not sure if you knew this at the time, but you were the fifth GM in 8 years.
Well, I knew it.
8 year stretch for the Dodgers. And was that ever in the back of your mind as you carried out the job? And what was your plan to establish a culture with the Dodgers and get the franchise
I was
moving?
well aware of it. I'd been in San Francisco for the 11 years before, and I had seen the constant change. And I've always believed that to establish a good culture, you need continuity. You certainly need continuity of leadership and continuity of personnel, if they're the right group of people, type of thing. So I kind of knew what I was getting in for, and I had a couple other opportunities where I was finalists for GM jobs, but I pulled out of those situations because I didn't think it was the right deal, the right situation, the right organization to really try and win all the time. But of course, the Dodgers are different. The Dodgers are always going to compete. They're one of the best franchises in the history of sport, not just in baseball, but think about their social stand on a lot of different things. The first black player and Jackie Robinson, really one of the first teams with a complex in the Dominican Republic, and then Hideo Nomo from Japan, Chan-Ho Park from Korea, really one of the Fernando Valenzuela and Julio Urias from Mexico, very international, and go and scout and find players that other people haven't really taken the time. At the outset, everybody scouts those areas now, but they were not the pioneers in a lot of those places. So I knew it was special. And I also knew it had, some turmoil to it. And I knew that I had to establish something that was going to be long lasting and be able to be that whenever I would be done with it, that the organization would be happy that they had hired me and the fan base would be proud of their team. And I think we accomplished that.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely established something long-lasting early on, because your first pick in your first draft was Clayton Kershaw, a guy who's defined the Dodgers and the sport of baseball for our entire generation, and he just resigned to stay in LA for even longer. What was your process like going into that first draft? Was Clayton your biggest want and need at pick 7, or were there some other guys you had higher on your board you wanted to end up with? Because we know there's a few pitchers who went ahead of him who didn't really pan out quite as well, and a couple pitchers who went just a little bit after who ended up doing really well in Tim Lincecum and Max Scherzer.
Yeah, it was really, as it turned out historically, a tremendous draft, high up in the draft. Logan White was our scouting director, amateur scouting director, and he and his scouts, including the late Calvin Jones, who just passed away within the last few weeks, was the amateur scout in the Dallas, Texas area. And we liked Clayton a lot. He was we thought that he could fit in with our group. We had a lot of high school players who were about to get to the big leagues, so we were going to have a younger group. He was, as I said, the first high school player taken in that draft. And we also benefited from the year before. The year before, Hochevar was the Dodgers' first pick, and he did not sign. So he went back into the draft. And as it turned out, Luke Hochevar was the number 1 pick in the country that year. Had he been drafted, which he was, but signed by the Dodgers in the 205 draft, he's not available. Detroit, who picked right before us, may have taken Clayton. So we kind of benefited a little bit by Hochevar deciding that the Dodgers offer wasn't what he was looking for and went back into the draft, which moved everybody back one. But, Clayton, I'm not sure what we would have done had Clayton been taken. Chancey would have taken maybe one of the other pitchers who went ahead of him, or maybe even Lincecum or Scherzer at that point in time. But, we were very, very happy to get Clayton. And within a very short period of time, he was starting to become somebody who was getting very, very close to the big leagues at a very young age. And you look at the record, the 3 Cy Youngs, the World Series championship, a lot of postseason appearances, a lot of other top 5 finishes in the Cy Young. One of the best people I've ever been around in the game. Charitable, gives his time, his financial wherewithal. I mean, you cross off a lot of areas that you hope your players represent, and he crosses all of them off.
Yeah, and though we don't hear much about it now, one thing we found out that isn't in that same draft in the 49th round, you picked a kid out of high school, Paul Goldschmidt. And we dug further into it and found out that the Dodgers didn't offer him a contract that year. And now we all know who Paul Goldschmidt is today. But what did you see?
Players, let me explain. When you take somebody that late,
yeah,
it's because they're going to be a tough sign.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know that they're going to probably be going off to college. But, you pick them so you have the right, just in case the player changes his mind. And Paul's had a great career, and at that stage of his life, he was not going to change his mind. So that's how it went. Yeah,
you're right. We do see that a lot, where we see like guys in the 49th round. There's a few cases where those guys pan out, but you're right. Not a lot of them.
It was just. We loved the player, and we would have signed him if he said, "You know what, I'm going to forego college." But he wasn't ready to forego college, and so we weren't able to sign him. That doesn't mean that it's not like it's a lost pick and we messed up the pick. Mm-hmm. We knew going in that he was a long shot to do it. But if you don't have the rights to him, you're not going to be able to sign him, just in case you get that call in late August and he says, "You know what, I've thought about this, and I think I'd like to turn pro." So anyway.
What did you see in him in the 49th round? Because, if he's fallen that far, player or other teams probably not seeing the same thing. I doubt that anyone was thinking he would turn into what he turned into today. So did you have any idea that he would end up being this good?
Well, he went to Texas State. He was a high profile player. And so people knew that he was going to be a strong player. Went to, I think, Woodlands High School, maybe in Texas. But again, you get to that point in the draft and you're willing to take a flyer on somebody just in the event they change their mind. But he was a high profile player at that stage. And that's why we took the chance. Again, the history of the draft for legitimate 49th round picks We got Mike Piazza a little bit after that, which obviously is a historic pick. But it doesn't usually happen that somebody who is ranked that deeply in the draft would end up being a big league player. He was picked in the 49th round, but I can tell you he was not ranked in the 49th round. He was ranked in the first couple of rounds.
That's really interesting.
Totally different deal.
Yeah. So before you became the Dodgers GM, you mentioned you were the director of player operations and then the assistant GM of the Giants. And that was during Barry Bonds' reign of terror across the MLB and some of the greatest seasons we've ever seen from a baseball player. What was it like witnessing Barry's dominance firsthand and also behind the scenes?
He was probably the greatest player I have seen on an everyday basis. He could play, he could hit, obviously, drew a lot of walks, so his strike zone recognition had to be precise, which it was. Tremendous power, a very, very good outfielder. I saw him break in with Pittsburgh as a center fielder, move to left field. Really great outfielder. And you look at his stolen base numbers. When you look at the home runs and you look at the stolen bases, there's nobody that's ever done that. There's just him. I mean, nobody, Babe Ruth won close to 100 games on either side of 100 as a pitcher. So unique talent in the Babe. Barry, to me, different, not a pitcher. Ruth and Ohtani are probably a conversation at some point. But Barry's ability to hit, to run, to think the game and understand the game and have a photographic memory to it, and a strike zone that was very, very small. He rarely chased a pitch out of the zone. Great player. And somebody who my first year with him back in, I think, 95, we didn't have a whole lot of conversations. And then little by little, we started to have conversations. And I think Barry was somebody who was very protective in who he brought into his inner circle and who he trusted and who he wanted to spend time with and talk with. And, it took a while, but I would say that, within a year or two of me going to San Francisco, we had a bunch of conversations on the game, on different aspects of life and things like that. But phenomenal player. Best I've ever been around on an everyday basis. And I'm not talking about a guy like Willie Mays that, I saw as a kid. I'm leaving that era out. I'm just talking about those in my 40 years of seeing somebody every day, day after day after day. And all due respect to Mike Trout, I've watched Mike Trout play against the Dodgers and what I've watched Mike Trout do. So, you don't have the same bearing. You learn a lot more when you see somebody every day. But Bonds, greatest hitter I've ever seen, position player on a daily basis, and Greg Maddux on the pitching side, same type.
One thing I didn't get to ask you in class, but I was really curious as a Giants fan, is after you left the Giants to take the Dodgers job, they went on to win 3 World Series titles during your time in LA. So I was just really curious, was it ever bittersweet to see your old team have so much success, or was it just kind of rivalry as usual between the Dodgers and the Giants?
It was rivalry as usual. I was, after we get eliminated, I would never wish bad on anybody. You can't, I don't think you can really do that. I don't know, whatever, but I would never wish bad on anybody. And I had a lot of friends there. I had a lot of associates there. Dodgers and Giants, we fought to the end all the time. We beat the Giants many, many times in standings and in games, I think over my tenure, we may have, had 50 more. If it was standings, might have been a 50-game advantage over them. But they did win 3 World Series, and I had a lot of associates there that I had known. And once we were out of it, I wasn't going to root against them. I didn't root for them, but I didn't want anything bad happening to them. And my son also worked there. My son also scouted there. So, for a parent to not want their child to experience the ultimate in anything, any career endeavor, I'm not sure that's a healthy thing. It's not like, whenever we were done, I would watch their games, and I wish them well, especially because my son was involved in it.
Yeah, and one move.
That'd be fair, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one move you made for the Dodgers to help the Dodgers try and compete with the Giants during that success was the trade to send James Loney and 4 other prospects to the Red Sox for Carl Crawford, Adrian Gonzalez, Josh Beckett, and Nick Punto. What was your thought process in making that trade? And were you kind of surprised that you could pull off that trade maybe a little bit?
Well, there was a lot of different factors that were involved in that. We look back and on a date in history, and we think about it. I have to go back to really where we were as an organization. On April 30th to May 1st of that year, 2012, ownership changed, and we had been through a rough 2012. Fan base started to wonder. We didn't draw real well for the first time in a long time in the 11-12 period of time. And new ownership came in, and they wanted to make a statement. And they've been making statements ever since. They've done great work, and they just did it again with Freddie Freeman. So, they wanted to win, and they wanted to show the people of LA that they were real. And they weren't going to let money stand in the way of making the team better. Plus, we also had a pretty big business venture coming up. We had a chance to have another cable TV deal, another regional sports network. And so they changed that, and they sold that package for a historic sum. Part of that was probably because of the team, which played hard, didn't make the playoffs, got eliminated within, I think, 48 hours of the last game from the wild card. But people knew that this was going to be exciting from here on, that the ownership was invested in it, that the ownership cared about the product, cared about making the fan experience as great as they could make it, cared about being involved in the community and all those things. And so that trade was kind of the headline to it, to see that. But if you go back even just a little bit before that, in that draft, we drafted Seager, signed him. We also signed Urias internationally, which we hadn't done a whole lot of international work in the previous era, and also Yasiel Puig. So you look back at the 2012 season, you've got some pretty key moments in there that changed the direction of the franchise under new ownership. The Puig signing got us back in Latin America and Cuba. The signing of Julio Urias, 20-game winner last year, closed out the 2020 World Series and the National League pennant winning game. The drafting of Seager, great shortstop, great person, and that big trade. And those things started to change the momentum, change the culture, change the expectation, both on the inside and the outside of the organization.
Yeah, and my next question is, you kind of touched on it a little bit at the end there, but you mentioned guys like Yasiel Puig, Urias, signing Seager, and some other moves like signing Greinke or Ryu.
Back-to-back days, no less. Two Cy Young runners-up on back-to-back days, a Saturday and a Sunday. Doesn't happen too often.
No. And then just kind of going off that, was there a move that you made during your time with the Dodgers that was like a favorite move? And could you talk about a little why that might have been your favorite?
It's tough to say favorite. I think some key moves, and not everything I did turned out. There's a couple free agents that I wish I hadn't signed. Big outfielder. People talk about in a Hall of Fame conversation now that I'm not necessarily on the same page with that. But I think you go back and the first deal I made from the GM chair was acquiring Andre Ethier from Milton Bradley. And Andre Ethier became one of the great Dodgers, ranks in the top 10, a lot of offensive categories, great in the community. Was really an excellent player to add to our group that had Russell Martin in it, and Chad Billingsley, and Jonathan Broxton, and James Loney, who you mentioned, and Matt Kemp. And so that was a key move. I think signing Greinke and Ryu, Greinke on a Saturday, Ryu the next day on a Sunday, you're talking about two really good pitchers to really put into your rotation. And probably the Manny Ramirez deal. We were a team that was okay, but we really needed a lift. And that deal came about the morning of the deadline. It wasn't something that was worked on for months. And, I tried to acquire Adrian Gonzalez since April. We acquired him in August. So, things sometimes take a longer time. That deal came about the morning of the trading deadline. And he came in here and hit 19 homers, drove in, I think, 50-something runs, hit almost 400, and really taught our younger players how to win and took a lot of pressure off them. And with Manny here, we went to the LCS in 08 and 09. And so that deal, I think, was another thing that kind of showed that we were real and that we wanted to compete and that we were willing to do what we needed to do it. I remember talking to my top personnel, Kim Ng and Vance Lovelace and Rick Ragazzo, and saying, when Manny took left field the first night, I was thinking, yesterday, or the day before yesterday, this guy wasn't even in our plans. We weren't going to watch him run out to left field and then do everything he did, his first year with us predominantly. But I think those, getting Andre right out of the gate a couple of weeks after I came here, Manny, and of course the two pitchers back to back. It's not easy to do, or not really common to get two Cy Young runners up within 24 hours of each other. Signed Greinke Saturday night and Ryu by noon on Sunday. So.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about the Dodgers' success, but I'd like to shift over a little bit and focus on last season. The Giants had a little bit more success, which we hadn't really seen since 2014 or 2016. With you having spent a good portion of your career in San Francisco and in LA, what was it like for you to see the Dodgers and the Giants battle it out for the division last year and then in the divisional round? And then do you have any thoughts about who's going to win the NL West this season, kind of leaving out the Padres? Because I don't think any of us want the Padres to win.
Well, I'll answer the last part of your question first. I don't think anybody can beat the Dodgers. I don't think anybody is good enough to beat the Dodgers. And now you got Freeman in the lineup. That is such a good team. And what they do know, and the Giants learned it a little bit last year, some of their younger players, the Dodgers do know how to win. They've all been there for many years. They get it. They understand the tenor of a season, the ups and downs of it. I don't think there's any team in the National League that's going to beat them. And we'll see about the American League if that last series takes place. Last year, I thought it was so exciting for baseball and for the state of California and for fan bases that are all over the country and all over the world, that they could watch two teams go at it every day for months on end. And then to have the series play out and to have it played out. And you're talking about, last at bat victory to decide who was going home and who was winning, and I thought it was phenomenal. And that it had taken so long to get to that point because Giants and the Dodgers hadn't played for a long time. And in that type of setting, I guess 1962 may have been the last time. I could be wrong on that. It was a playoff series between the two franchises because they tied in the 62 season, but unique. And, we watched Red Sox Yankees from across the coast for a long time and LCSs and different things like that, Division Championship Series. So it was good to see those two franchises get after it for a while.
And then
I don't see that happening this year. Sorry.
That hurts, but
you and the Giants memorabilia behind you there, Jack.
I don't blame you. I mean, getting Freeman is adding to a murderer's row even further. They're so good, and it sucks that probably not going to see them be bad for a very long time.
Yeah, and to end this off on a little bit of a fun note, Jack and I are both from San Jose, and since moving off the MLB front office work, he became a scout for the Sharks. And just curious how you like working with the Sharks in hockey now, and how do you like the city of San Jose?
You know what? I'm honored to be able to work in the NHL, as I've been honored to work the 40 years in baseball. It's an honor to work in pro sports, and my passion for hockey goes back to when I was just a little boy, just like baseball. and that I've paid attention and that I've made contacts and I've networked, and I've spent a lot of my winter, a week or so every winter, with NHL teams way before I was hired in San Jose, to learn the business and to have conversations with the leadership, curiosity, and a lot of exchange of ideas. And that they came to me a few years ago, and we decided to do a partnership. I scout for them. I try to help their younger executives and coaches in a little bit of a leadership role. Try to be helpful. And so it's an honor. And I've been going to San Jose for years. When I was with the Giants, and to get my hockey fix, I would drive down 101 or 280 from San Fran down to San Jose and spend a lot of nights in that arena. And so it's cool to be back there and to be part of a franchise that's right now, trying to get its footing again. And guys have played hard this year. They have played really hard. In fact, I'll be going out to see him tonight against LA.
Well, I think we know if you've got your fingerprints on a franchise, it's a good chance that they can bring themselves up and become something successful. We really appreciate your time coming on and talking baseball, and we wish you luck this season with SportsNet and continued luck with the Sharks. And yeah, we just really appreciate you taking your time to come on.
Well, thank you, Jack. You too, Ryan. Appreciate being on. Wish you guys the best.
Thank you, Mr. Colletti.
And hope your career endeavors and your dreams and aspirations, I hope you exceed them by miles.
Well, thank you, and go Giants.
Thank you. Go Dodgers.